Hi, can you hear me?
Hey George. Yeah, I can hear you. How's it going?
Okay, pretty good. How are you?
Good, good.
Good.
Thanks for coming.
No problem. Let me turn my video.
Yeah, does the
Or
video work for you?
I'm not sure. I don't see it. Can you hear me?
Hey George. Yeah, I can hear you. How's it going? Site. It might be video settings,
That's
whatever.
okay.
Yeah, I'll fix it next time. I don't understand why it doesn't let you come on. Oh, wait. Video. Panelists on? Host on? I don't know if that makes any difference.
Okay, no problem.
Let me ensure that David's supposed to be coming too, but let's see. All right, let me turn on the stream on LinkedIn. All right, there, there we go. Going live. Broadcast has ended. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay, hold on. Hey, David, how's it going?
Hey, good morning. Hey, George, how's it
Hey,
going?
pretty good. How are you, David?
Hey, I'm doing great. Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah, it's been a good week.
Great. Getting things
Sweet.
done.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, looks like we are live. So yeah, hope everyone's having a great week. We've been having a good week too. Lots of interesting stuff going on and definitely gearing up for the holidays. So yeah, today we've got David. We've also got George on the call. George has been one of our talented regulatory experts. He's been in the industry for 30 plus years, and we're happy to have him on the team. So today's topic is a really interesting one. It's the Predetermined Change Control Program guidance that recently got finalized. The guidance is specifically on the topic of AI-enabled medical devices. However, I think we can learn a couple of things from this to apply the PCCP even more broadly to that. So I figured, today, like let's just start out with just kind of talking about maybe some high points and kind of what we have, what are big takeaways from like the PCCP guidance are. I can attempt to go first at this. I think the PCCP was meant to fill in a gap where there was this always the question of, should it be a new marketing submission or should it be a note to file, what to do in the middle? And I think the PCCP aims to add some more detail or at least give us another tool on that pathway, and it bridges the gap between the two worlds. And I like how the FDA gave a lot of examples on what they consider going into a PCCP and what kind of changes would be acceptable in a PCCP or not. I'm looking forward to using this new tool in our upcoming devices and for our existing clients and devices as well to de-risk the changes for the current devices. Anyway, like we'll get more into the details as we talk about it. David, any particular takeaways? And George, I'd love to hear about your takeaways as well.
Yeah, so I would just say, yeah, this was a statute that was passed in 2022, so pretty recently, I believe. And it's interesting when you go to the actual statute, it's not that long. It's only like 2 or 3 paragraphs, but it has some pretty big implications. And I think there's only really two small regulations that come out of it. And then the guidance, on the other hand, is like, or the AI guidance was like 50 pages long. And then there's the draft general guidance, is a little bit shorter. So it's always interesting just how much, like there's like 2 paragraphs of the law, like a couple regulations. Usually regulations are longer, and then this huge, it's like all the stuff in the guidance. But yeah, I think it seems to me that it was really motivated by the desire for kind of continuous learning in AI models, and that was maybe what prompted Congress to say, "Hey, let's add this new pathway to market for device changes." But then, yeah, it seems like it's being used in a lot of ways, and I get the feeling the FDA is really excited about decreasing the burden on them for kind of boring type submissions. Like one example is I think I forget the exact name of the company that used the PCCP, but they wanted to support like different like temperature monitoring watches, I believe, for like fertility prediction app. And previously they had been doing new submissions for like each new watch, which I'm sure for FDA is like not like it's just a lot of work for and you're probably verifying it almost the same way. So I think they did two. And then for the third one, they did a PCCP saying, hey, for any new watch that comes on the market that we support, this is how we're going to test it. And then now they don't have to go back to FDA over and over for this change. And I think with the antibiotic susceptibility testing, there's a specific guidance on the PCCPs for that as well. I think because of the same thing that FDA is just dealing with so many submissions, which were, like I think the way you test it is always the same, but it is changing the intended use because the drug bug combinations are going into the intended use statement. So there's not really a way around it there. And I think so. That's my interpretation. It was, to summarize, AI kind of enabled it, but then now FDA is like, hey guys, let's use this for all these annoying situations that we we could avoid having to do so many submissions for. But I don't know. I'm maybe reading too much into it, but that's kind of my take.
Sure. And the product that I've been managing, we've done 9 FDA submissions, 4 traditionals and 5 specials. And right now, I have 3 pending, 2 specials and 1 traditional. And so most of the specials are for changes being made to the algorithm. And the FDA, it's very time consuming. Even though there's specials, very seldom do they get cleared in 30 days. It usually extends. They don't get converted to traditional. But I think this supports your belief that it's going to reduce the workload to the FDA. The one thing you have to avoid is to make sure that your intended use statement is either generic enough so that you can utilize the tool. Otherwise, like you said, you're going to force yourself into having to do 510Ks. So that's how I look at it and how it can benefit companies.
Yeah, I guess my takeaway on like, can you change your device intended use of the PCCP? I thought my takeaway was that no, you couldn't.
Yeah. I think I misspoke there. Like I think
Okay.
yeah. It's not changing the intended use, but it's a change that would definitely require another submission previously. So yeah, but no, I agree. So
Yeah, but like the use case of like the antibiotic susceptibility testing, that does seem like it changes the intended use, or maybe like as George mentioned, maybe the intended use was crafted in a more generic way, so it actually doesn't. I don't
yeah.
know.
And I would say, just to be clear, we work on IVDs software, but we ourselves are not IVD experts. So this is me kind of reading in from the sides. But let me pull up the guidance real quick, and I can anyway. I don't want to derail the conversation, but I'll give you an update in a minute on that.
Sounds good. So I think now we should talk about some of the examples that FDA gave us. I'm going to share my screen here real quick. I like to read these guidance documents in reverse. It's the most effective way for me to do it. Just because the examples give me something concrete to look at, and it also lets me calibrate. Like whenever FDA says something like significant or large change or whatever, like there are these words that leave a lot open to interpretation. And I find the easiest way to calibrate myself on FDA's thresholds for that is to read these examples first. So read the examples first, and then I read the rest of the guidance document. So yeah, some of these examples are pretty interesting. The first one is about this patient monitoring software, which is this separate box that can go into like a hospital room. So this box can read various signals such as blood pressure, pulse ox, EKGs, and a whole host of other signals, and then it can detect the onset of physiologic instability. And then when it does detect it, releases a audible alarm on that. And in this situation, the manufacturer has submitted a PCCP. They would like to retrain the model to reduce the false alarm rate while maintaining sensitivity. Any thoughts on this modification? My question to you guys, before this PCCP guidance came out, where would you have put this change? Like, would you have put this as a letter to file? Or would you have said, oh, this is more of a special or a new 510K? Which one you think this would have been?
Definitely a 510K, in my opinion, because you're talking about changing the algorithm. And with the FDA software modification guidance, I think that's one of the thresholds to trigger 510K. So that would be my vote.
Yeah, David?
Yeah, see, I would have probably put it more under a lettered file. Just, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, just from an engineering perspective, if you're validating it with the same like test data set and you're expecting the performance to go up, I wouldn't see it as a very high risk thing. Although I'll be honest, George, your comment about the software change to an existing device guidance, like I'm not, I would say, super familiar with the workflow in that, and like what examples they have. So yeah, I'd be curious to maybe dig into that.
Well, yeah, the reason why I would say it, so we've all talked about, the modifications guidance. You can really, expand that as far as your decision. But in this case, talk about reducing the false alarms. So that would be feedback from the field, I would think that would probably be a complaint. And then you'd have to do a CAPA, go into the quality system. And then once again, when the FDA comes to inspect you, the person that's going to read the letter of the file will be, an investigator. And so that would be my concern, that if this was, let's say there wasn't a complaint involved, maybe it was just feedback, or, you know, you noticed this in demonstrations, then yeah, if you hadn't released the software and you had control over it, then sure, a letter to file probably would make sense, but it's in the context. And I think that sentence, reduce the false alarms, you know, I'd be concerned about that. That would be the initiative, the initiate, what would initiate the change. And so that's why I would feel safer with a 510K. But once again, it depends upon the circumstances.
Can I share my screen real quick, Yujan?
Oh, sure.
Okay, and by the way, they have construction going on in the background, so I apologize for any background noise. So yeah, so George, I would first of all, I would say, like, it may not always be in response to a CAPA for something like this. Like I would think, like a lot of times the clients are just always trying to make the model better. And so even if there aren't any particular complaints, they're just going to be trying to make it better. Also, as a real quick aside, I did look up the anti-susceptibility testing guidance, and it's changing the breakpoint. So it's not adding new drug-bug combinations. So which I think changing the breakpoints would have previously required another 510K. Anyway, just as an aside. So I think that resolves that inconsistency. But this is the software change guidance. And I think it kind of comes down to this question here, right? Could the change, like retraining the model, significantly affect clinical functionality or performance that are directly associated with the intended use of the device? So I guess it's kind of, do you think we're going this way or this way, right?
It's all based on this significantly, right? I think the examples FDA gives in this document gives us some hints on what they consider significant or not. And I think that's where I came to the conclusion that retraining is just a note to file, is with the help of one of the examples in this document is where I originally came with that idea. Because yeah, like I would have put this kind of change also as just a letter to file. Like it's like, to me, it's like making a device more cyber secure by just increasing the version level, right, of like all of your software dependencies. If you just upgrade all of them, people patch software vulnerabilities and those kind of things. So that definitively does not need a new marketing submission. FDA probably recognizes that if they required people to do a new marketing submission, that those kind of changes would probably just in practice be less likely to happen, which is what I worry about. If we had recommended everyone go and we're required to get a new 510K for something like this, where it's just making the device better, maintaining sensitivity and reducing the false alarm rate. It's making it better. And retraining the algorithm is not like re-architecting the whole thing. It's literally like pushing go again on the same code you had before, just using different data. So to me, it was like that's more in line with like a cybersecurity update. By the way, this is all just my personal opinion and no way reflects FDA's stamp of approval on this. But that was my original thought process.
Well,
It's like,
and I think I certainly think in the case of cybersecurity, there's the time issue that like FDA recognizes, hey, like if there's a 0-day vulnerability, we want people to update these things as fast as possible. The problem is currently is like, yeah, well, old devices just aren't getting updated at all. And so I think FDA is like, hey, we better not add a barrier to doing a cybersecurity patch. And so they're very clear on that point that you can just update it.
Yeah.
I think though, yeah. So it does seem a little different maybe than this in that sense that there's not really a time factor associated with it. But I totally agree with what you're saying that if you require retraining, anytime you retrain the model, you got to do another 510K. People are going to do a lot fewer retrainings, right? They're just going to say, yeah, sensitivity is good enough. We don't need to
exactly.
make it better.
I mean, maybe I'm overstepping and like determining what society wants. I mean, I have been American. I have been a US citizen for T-4 years of my life. So I don't know. I think I kind of understand. I would kind of venture to guess like as a society, we would rather have better devices and like we would want to encourage retraining and making them better, just as we want to encourage making our devices more cyber secure. Even though like doing all the cybersecurity patches, upgrading, that has a non-zero risk. Like sometimes software packages break when you upgrade them, right? And like we've decided that we're going to favor upgrading for cybersecurity where it might affect not necessarily safety, but it could introduce another bug, right? So we've already kind of made that determination as a society. It's like, hey, there are certain categories of changes that we want to fast track that may introduce other issues.
I totally agree with that. But I think what society wants is like that's kind of like vigilante FDA. At the end of the day, it's like, well, what does the law say, and what are the implications for our clients if we do this? Like when you get audited, what's going to happen, and how risky is it?
Right.
But I totally agree with what you're saying, though. But yeah,
in the audit, I'd be curious to hear what you guys have experienced so far. I've only experienced one FDA audit where we've used the retraining as a note to file, and there were no issues flagged in that audit that were around this topic. Like we retrained the algorithm many times on just a note to file, but it was not brought up. Now that could just be that the auditor didn't review that part, or it could be something deeper. I don't know if you guys have any other experiences on audits.
yeah. I do not have experience with this situation. I don't know, George, but
Yeah, I have a lot.
I was gonna say, yeah, you probably have a lot.
And the thing is, and also I follow what happens with other companies. And I do agree with you that what society wants, I look at like probably the model for the FAA. Okay. In other words, when they discover a problem, they probably fix it right away. And they probably work closely with, with the airline carriers. And this is why the safety record for flying is so good because of that. We only hear about maybe the near misses or whatever, but I think the FAA model is probably something where we should probably go to. In other words, if you know you have a problem, get it fixed, document it, don't try to hide it, and then learn the lessons. In terms of FDA inspections, what I find is the FDA investigator inspector has a whole different mindset than, let's say, the scientific reviewer at FDA. And so when they come in to inspect you, they're looking for systematic problems like design control or whatever. How did this get through? And so I think the first based upon my experience, the first thing they check is your complaints, then your cappers, and then there's always that danger that if you didn't submit a 510K, that suddenly things would stop. That happens more, I think, in the physical device world than in the software. I think that, you know, I think nowadays everybody understands how software works and how the FDA acknowledges that you could release software with a bug in, a known anomaly as long as, the risk is low. So that's the only reason, and going back to the FDA guidance document for the predetermined change controls, it's interesting that they lead off with what I would consider a customer complaint, okay? But I'm assuming that if you go back to that, that they said that this is a candidate that would fit for predetermined change control things that you could fix on your own. Is that correct, Yujan?
Yeah, sorry, Yujan, I'll pass it back to you. Yeah.
So that example, they're saying that this would be eligible for it.
I don't think actually this was due to a complaint in the field. I think this was just like the manufacturer knows that they're going to continue to improve the algorithm, and they've elected to do a PCCP with that knowledge in hand. Is the way that I read this.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so like I think this is something that we need to resolve. It's like if our previous recommendation on this was note to file, and now there's a PCCP, it's pretty clear here that this is a usage of a PCCP. What's not clear to me is FDA saying you need to now do this as a PCCP, or the previous, you're saying that the note to file is no longer valid because we have a PCCP. I'm not sure. Like, I don't know if the question makes sense, but it, so like beforehand, like the tools we had were note to file and traditional, or I'll just say 510K, in all flavors of 510K, right? And exactly like which way it went was kind of up to the manufacturer, but you didn't really have any other tools, right? And so what we were saying is there's kind of this gray zone here, retraining to maintain or improve effectiveness. And probably I'll say without changes to intended use, right? Pre-PCCP, our school of thought was note to file, right? But post PCCP, it really seems like FDA in this example, they're saying this is a PCCP.
Yeah.
Right. Now, my question is, is this first method still valid? Like, sure, we have another tool, PCCP, but do we have to necessarily use it? Just because we have the tool doesn't mean we need to use it, right? But is FDA saying that we actually need to use it? That's my question that I haven't really been able to get a good answer reading the guidance for.
It seems possible to me that just FDA had a more conservative stance all along and that they would have expected most retraining to be a 510K. And I mean, right, and then become apparent.
Yeah.
With the guidance and the way they're talking about the examples.
Or the other alternative is that, like, there's definitely a lot of bias, right? Like FDA is seeing a lot of people submitting a 510K, but they're not seeing the people that are doing a note to file.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't a problem all. It's just a survivorship bias kind of thing. Who knows what it really is? And maybe FDA is thinking, well, rather than just definitively telling people, oh, this is a note to file, which that's going to be abused almost certainly, right? Like, maybe rather than doing that, the only other option is to include a new tool.
Yeah.
That could be another scenario as well.
I think it's interesting too, on the E-Star, there's not a section for this. In other words, the FDA hasn't defined how to package this in the E-Star other than to say, put it into, I think, your device description or something. And how do you handle that? Do you say that releasing something that may have issues or we want to improve it, but we just don't know just yet how it's going to happen? And how does FDA look at that if you're open and saying that things may change? In other words, can you submit a 510K just for a PCP? And we've talked about it. If you select special 510K, it asks the question, you know, is this for a PCP? And they warn you can't do it on a special. You have to do it in a traditional. I guess with FDA has to look at everything and then decide.
Yeah,
And
I think, in fact, I'd say they suggest, I forget which guidance I read this in, but I think they suggest actually do it in a whole 510K just for the PCCP.
just for that, yeah.
Though I would say
Yeah,
the one time that I've submitted the PCCP, it was not separate. It was kind of an add-on thing. But I do think a few of the examples that I've seen, like I went through a list of a number of submissions that had a PCCP in it because it's in the 510K letter. So you can actually go and see. And I do believe several of them were standalone 510Ks with all, it was just the PCCP, it was the whole thing.
That would be the safe route. I wouldn't want to have my first 510K and then have it held up because, the PCP. So you're
yeah,
saying that, yeah, you'd recommend just doing the 510K for a PCP and have the FDA review it based upon its merits. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, it depends on the scenario. Like in the case where, let's say you did your first 510K and then you added another hardware platform or you adjusted the breakpoints for, and you're starting to say, hey, this is getting to be really burdensome doing all these 510Ks. Now let's make a PCCP so we don't have to moving forward. In that case, probably just doing the PCCP for it makes sense. But I think another strategy that we haven't used, but that I do think is one we're going to try pretty soon here, or maybe we haven't, we've already done, is having a PCCP where it's kind of like the next batch of software changes, not for an AI retraining, but for other software changes. And I think in that case, it wouldn't really be helpful to do it as like if you need a whole 510K just for that, like it's not really that useful.
Yeah.
So,
I think the FDA is going to have a webinar in January on this, given, I think that's going to be their way of explaining how this works, perhaps. I saw that.
hey, have y'all ever done an abbreviated 510K?
No,
I've never done that. Yeah.
I think an abbreviated one,
This is
you have to have the declarations of conformity, and I've never, I haven't seen any. As far as special 510Ks, I think that I've always had the belief they're the underutilized fast track.
yeah.
Like the
I mean,
last
no,
time we
note
talked,
here. I mean,
excuse me?
note here though, like you can't use a special, or it's not listed to use a
Yeah,
special to add a PCCP.
but with an
Just
abbreviated, you could. Yeah.
yeah, that's what they're saying here. Is if you wanted to add to establish a PCCP for for a device prior to manufacturer implementing. I guess this doesn't actually quite say if your device is already on the market that you actually. Sorry, I think that might not be completely accurate. What my statement is. Yeah, I'm not sure actually. Can you use a special to add a PCCP to a device already on the market for a 510K cleared or a de novo cleared device? I don't know the answer to that. I don't think this tells us actually. But I mean, safe to say that you could definitely do it as a traditional 510K, and that has been done. There's a couple of examples of that where I think all that they did is add a PCCP to it. And he also mentioned that there's a couple of scenarios that we're thinking about using a PCCP, right? I think there is the pre-market submission. I think if you have known changes, or you can speed up your pre-market submission if you know the changes you're going to make ahead of time. Perhaps adding it as a PCCP could get you a pre-market clearance, or otherwise you would have had to wait for those changes to be implemented. I think the other place that it may be possible, like what if you got some findings from FDA during the hold letter, could you add a PCCP at, I might be too late to add a
No,
PCCP during that point, right?
I think they state that they wouldn't allow you to add a PCCP during the submission, that you'd have to resubmit. So
Okay, that sucks. Yeah, so it really is like if you could predict ahead of time what the changes would be, now the PCCP potentially speed up that pre-market submission timeline. It seems like FDA has given us Like it used to be 2 things to worry about, and now there's 3.
Well,
Now it's not it's not a dilemma anymore. It's a trilemma, right?
well, or maybe or it's we have more options to strategize about. And I do think, especially with MedTech OS, in the way that we can kind of generate documents from the Notion databases pretty easily, I think it's really nice. If we're using Notion for software development, we have the next several milestones kind of mapped out in our product development roadmap. And if the last 2 milestones we don't get there by the time we want to submit, it's relatively easy if we have all the requirements, the verification protocols, the software risk assessments done for those features. Now we can have a flag where we just say, okay, let's now generate a PCCP for these, and it should be almost turnkey within MedTech OS. And that's why I think, you know, and anyone could use this, but especially with tooling like MedTech OS, it could be very convenient and straightforward. And you know, I kind of think FDA would go for it from my. I think I talked to Jessica, I forget her last name, she was one of the authors on the PCCP guidance.
Lamb.
That sounds right. Last December, and I specifically asked her about this, and she said that she thought that was a valid way to use a PCCP. I think Yujan, you said you had a similar interaction with maybe someone else. If
Yeah. Yeah.
And anyway, I think for software that's a really interesting round, and I haven't seen any submissions where it seems like that's been done, and we haven't yet actually done it ourselves. But I just think it's a great option that could really optimize the software development roadmap. I don't know. Is it clear like what I'm talking about though to y'all, like how that would work?
Yeah, it is. And I'll come back to the question: is the PCCP in that case a requirement, or is the old note to file method? Because typically, like the changes that we talked about there were like we're going to add like MDDS stuff. We're going to add kind of lower risk items, right?
No. I'm talking about for things that would not. Yeah, if it's like that, then you just don't even bother. Just do it as a note to file. But I'm talking about specifically things that would have required a 510K, or most likely would have, right? Like, yeah.
Most likely would have, yeah, but most likely would not have been a note to file. Okay, so what we're saying is like, okay, I mean, like there still is a little bit of fuzziness there. Like, you know, even those changes that are like, there's changes that definitely would be note to file. There's changes that definitely would be 510K that would go into PCCP, but there's still an overlap, and like we would still have. I guess it's still a dilemma now in this case: is it a note to file or a PCCP? We still have to make that call. Whereas before it was just a note to file or 510K, and there was no like middle option.
Yeah, I totally. It's that significance spectrum. Like, where do you land? Is this significant? Is it really significant? Maybe it's not quite significant enough to be really significant. You know, like, and now there's like that option in the middle for the PCCP, and it kind of depends on the risk tolerance of the company. I think is probably all of us as the user base gets bigger for bigger companies, the risk benefit trade-off shifts, because now it's like, hey, if FDA pulls it off the market in an audit, that's now a massive problem and we're losing tons of money from it. So the relative trade-off of, hey, let's just do a 510K, it starts to shift. Whereas for the startups where they're like, hey, we don't have anyone using the product anyway, even if they took us off the market, like it stinks, but we just want to get to a feature-full enough product that people will buy it, which we don't even have that. Then their risk tolerance is gonna be more shifted the other way. And anyway, so I think, yeah, I totally agree. It's still blurry, but it's at least nice to have this option in the middle.
So the example I was mentioning earlier, where with this one product, we've submitted 9 510Ks, and 4 of them been traditional, 5 have been special. The reason we went to that was because we didn't do a special, we did a letter to file, and then when we followed up 2 years later with the traditional, the FDA asked us, how did this feature get cleared? And we were like, a letter to file. And, you know, it was a stressful time because they were uncomfortable with that. And we had to supply all the data during that traditional 510K to kind of cover that. And eventually we received a clearance and that particular feature was covered. And from there, the client was risk adverse. They learned the hard way where, oh, okay, any change, we're going to do a special because we never want to have to go through that again. So we didn't have, this tool that we're talking about right now, but that's one of the reasons why we have so many specials. And like I said, right now we have 5 cleared specials and we have 2 pending for the same, software. And I guess if this option was available way back when, this would have made a lot of sense to the client because, when you start talking about all the work that goes into, 7 special 510Ks, significant amount of time, money.
That's really interesting. So it's
Yeah.
not just being caught on the audit side where they're less technical generally and
Yeah.
may not necessarily like catch on to it, but also like on the follow-on submissions, it can create problems where they're like, hey,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. That and the other way you can get burnt is that your competitor sees this feature and they submit a 510K and then the FDA reviewer says, well, that feature hasn't been cleared. That's happened. And usually these are for features. So features are usually in my mind the trigger point for 510K. You're not changing the intended use, okay? But you may add a feature and somebody, your competitor would see it and they need to react and then they'll like submit a 510K and then it'll be discovered that that particular feature was never cleared. So I think with the PCCP, like you said earlier, if you change the intended use, it's ineligible. Okay, and if you wanted to add that feature in your intended use, then clearly you have to do a 510K. But so those are 2 scenarios that I've seen where, FDA has in that catch-up 510K, they'll how did you get from version, if they're looking at version 8 and the last time the FDA reviewed it was version 5, they might want to know how you got cleared for that. And then a competitor not turning you in is using your device as a predicate device. And so, but if you have that PCCP, then you'll be covered for these types of things, perhaps.
Sorry, I'm just kind of sketching out my thoughts for like the key takeaways, at least for me. So is this an accurate statement to you? So like before the PCCP, say we have version 1, this has already been cleared. So this is 510K or de novo or version 1 cleared. And then, we're gonna take that and we're gonna deploy version 1 out into the post market. And then we're gonna plan what's gonna go in the next version. And then we're gonna implement that. And then we're gonna V&V it. And then there's the question, is it a note to file or a 510K? Really, like this question will be answered maybe a bit earlier on, but we're at this point here, and then we say, okay, well, if it's a 510K, now we got to wait 6 months before we can deploy it, right? Or
Yeah.
perhaps we can deploy with like a research use only, kind of a gray zone, but that has been done. Flag. That's an even riskier approach, really. Or you can say note to file and say that we're going to deploy this immediately as a note to file. We're going to take some risk, right? Risky road. But now we're saying there's another branch in this where when we do the version 2.0 planning and we know what features we're going to build, we could turn that around and submit a 510K for just a PCCP with the version 2.0 plan. And in a perfect situation, the PCCP will be authorized just in time for the implementation to be completed.
Yeah.
And in theory, we save 6 months without taking any risks.
Yeah.
I think this is an interesting alternative to like doing it during the first 510K for V1. If you've planned it that far, you can do it then, right? But if you don't, or like then yeah, like this could shift the timeline quite a bit. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the downside
definitely.
you have to have it planned out quite well in advance. Like you have to have all the requirements and verification protocols and everything all mapped out at a high level of detail that often with our clients they don't know that well. Like it's not until they start building it that they're like really understanding exactly how they want to do it. And that would be a problem either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then now there's like, well, the PCCP, we can't modify the PCCP, but is it close enough? What we
Yeah.
did is that's yet another question, which
Yeah,
makes it
yeah.
even more complicated. But no, I totally get like it is another. This is just another option. Like,
No,
what other ways could we use the PCCP? Like you'd mentioned, if we know ahead of time, like if the first one had if the first 510K had a PCCP in it, then yeah, you could kind of like if you knew V2.0 features when you submitted, you could add that. Say, sorry, we could probably say 510K for V1.0 and PCCP for, I don't know, V2.0.
Yeah.
Like this is yet another option, right? So then we have, well, this will be cleared here, and it would lead to a deployment of this, and then it would kind of in a timeline wise, it would lead to the immediate deployment of version 2.0 if you get it, if you can predict software development, which I'm not good at doing that. That's why we have Agile, because I don't think anyone's good at doing that. But if you can foresee that.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think there's a question that actually came in a little bit ago. So Cooper, hey, by the way, thanks for your comment. I think I saw you commented on my post yesterday. Thanks for your question. I hope you're doing well. And so the question is, if you submit a PCCP as described in the patient monitoring example, once you reach the specified parameters after retraining the AI model, are you able to retrain it again in the future to improve performance using the same justification? I'm asking this to determine if including the plan to modify the model enables you to make multiple distinct changes to the model or only retrain it to bring it within the specified parameters the once. So certainly, I think there's some flexibility in how you write the PCCP, but you certainly can have multiple different modifications that you describe, not just one. And in fact, like in the one PCCP that I've done, there was actually like I think 12 changes. So for a whole variety for multiple models, and so certainly, and I think probably there's a whole class of changes where you can say, hey, we're gonna just keep improving the performance following this approach, and I would imagine that the FDA would be fine with that. So I think the answer is yes, you are able to continue retraining it under that PCCP. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question. But yeah.
Here's another scenario I wanted to mention. We're always talking about the FDA, and what about if you're a small company, okay, and you have some really innovative technology, you got clearance, and then you're making changes, okay, and then a bigger company is interested in licensing your technology. So in my experience with the larger companies, that the regulatory teams on in those companies are tougher than the FDA. And they'll look at your files and question during the due diligence period, why did you make this change and what was your rationale for not doing this or that? And then I've also seen situations where the regulatory teams have a lot of influence in the decision. And it's not that they won't eventually license that technology, but they'll use it as a negotiating tool to get a lesser price offer. And the rationale is because we're going to have to submit catch-up 510Ks or we're going to be exposed. So I think that this is something to think about, and one of the reasons why you might want to use this tool, because there are going to be changes. The nature of anything engineered is to make it better. And, like you said, having this already done with the FDA is not only going to save you money, but it could save you a significant amount of money. Let's say if a larger company wants to utilize your technology, license it. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think like it will decrease the just overall risk, right? So then,
Yeah.
like
Or
if
treat it
you
as
like
an
when you
investment.
acquired, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
I guess it'd be one of the
or
why you'd want to do this.
So I see kind of make sure I'm following, kind of in the same way that having a nicely run QMS is important for the
Absolutely.
FDA, but it also, in addition to just doing it because you could get dinged in an audit, it also makes you a better acquisition target for a larger company because they're gonna
Absolutely.
do due
And
diligence for that.
not only that, they might allow you to be more autonomous. If your quality system's a mess, they might say, we need to take over this company as opposed to running it as an autonomous unit. I've seen
Yeah,
that.
that that makes sense. And so you're saying that if you take the risky route and do notes to file for everything, then the larger company will come in and say, hey guys, this is not appropriate. We need to do a big catch up 510K. And not only that, yeah, we're gonna pay you less money for
Yeah.
to buy you because we know there's a big mess we gotta clean up now.
Yeah, it won't kill the deal. And they don't mention that to you. It goes back to the business development person, the person that's interested in your company. And so the regulatory people, once again, they have a lot of say so and they know all the tricks of the industry. And so, in these larger companies, I find them more risk adverse than even the FDA because they're worried about the reputation of the company, they're worried about their position, and the way that can blow back on you is just like how you described. So I always advise clients, think big, think 3 steps ahead of, where you are today. Once again, if another company's going to acquire you, the better your regulatory file, the position of it, your QMS, it's only going to help you. It's like an investment. So maybe the PCCP is an investment, like a
Yeah, no,
patent.
totally. Yeah, I'm trying to sketch out like I think what kind of visually what we're saying. Like ideally, you just need one PCCP to cover a specific type of change. So you say low risk and low cost. So this is going to be low risk, high cost. This is the only option we had before, right? So for like changes that like retraining the algorithm to improve performance, if you can write the PCCP in a general way, that same PCCP is going to be a gift that keeps on giving,
Yeah.
right? Because then you can reuse this PCCP, right, for all future versions, for future changes. Like, if all your changes were just retraining and improving, then you could like use that same PCCP, or at least just not have to worry about that change again, that type of change again, right? Versus before the PCCP, the only two options you had were do a whole bunch of note to files, hope for the best, or just kind of take on a little bit more risk there, or if you want to de-risk it completely, then do a 510K each time, which is you have to pay the FDA user fee and all the preparation and whatnot. But now this other option, you could get that first PCCP authorized, and there's no expiration date to that authorization as long as you follow the
Yeah.
modification procedures and everything in that.
Interesting.
And that would be interesting. And this is slightly different than this like version 2.0 planning. In this case, this
It's
PCCP is really like a one-time use PCCP,
yeah,
right? For specific features. But
that's
you could have more general purpose changes like retraining or more abstract changes.
yeah. I think for the ones where you could reuse it multiple times, it'll probably need to be more even. I would imagine even more defined and precise in what you could do. I think for the software like feature changes where it's really like we're adding something to the software, not retraining, you certainly could do the same thing for like maybe 4 features, right? And then you'd have here are all the requirements for all of them, the verification protocol, right? And when you would submit a PCCP for that, you'd want to split out those modifications into separate groups so that FDA could review them separately. And they might say, hey, we accept these 3 and not this 4th one. And then so maybe that would be a situation where you could reuse it, but in a much more limited capacity than in retraining. But
Interesting. So you're saying like speculative PCCP, or like because just because you have a PCCP doesn't force you to implement that change. You could decide to not implement a PCCP.
yeah, it For sure. But the downside is you'd have to plan out all these features in a pretty high level of detail in order to submit it. And then if you're not really serious about implementing it, it might not be worth
Right.
doing that. Like you might instead wait for the approach that you have here with you just submit the PCCP up front before the implementation. Like that maybe would it make more sense. And just repeat that 4 times. Possibly. I don't know. But
Right. Yeah, like in this case, it's just saving you 6 months versus in this case, it is saving you cost as well. Like I guess if you, yeah, you're right. There's like yet another branch somewhere here. It's like PCCP for version 1 and multiple, not really speculative, but I guess what would you call it? I'll just call it that for lack of another term. It's like speculative processing in the CPU version 2.0 and beyond. Like, yeah, we think we need these features, so we're going to go ahead and just include it, pay the user fee once, and use the quantum computer to come up with all of the possibilities and to just submit everything. I don't know. That could be an interesting application of this that we've got to try out.
Yeah, push the limits.
I'm sure that was not an intended usage of the PCCP. We might be kind of using it off-label, but it's worth a shot. Anyway, we are at time, so definitely thank you for everyone's participation. I think that was a very interesting conversation. And yeah, I'd love to see how we end up utilizing this new tool. I think it has the potential to save a lot of time and money. I think it's a net positive. Like I can see now how, sure, there are probably some categories what were a node to file before. Now we're probably going to do a PCCP. Maybe it's a little bit more work there. But on the flip side, there were a lot more 510Ks that now can be PCCP. So I think the net average result is less work for industry, lower cost, faster time to market. So seems really positive to me.
and I didn't mention this, but there we have a big PCCP article. Well, it's not that big, but a recently big FAQ, and I'll probably take a pass of updating it now that the new guidance is out, and maybe I'll take some of these ideas here and kind of incorporate my questions too. In that, maybe another comment.
Right.
Yujan, I was thinking the next 2 weeks we're off, right, for the holidays. So definitely next week, and I'm out the week after that. So maybe let's start again on that would be the 9th. And then our company retreat is the week after that. So I think we'll also skip the 16th. And I was going to propose that we plan out maybe the next couple months of topics and try to promote it a little more before. Maybe that's
Obviously, like to do it.
Maybe a discussion for the recording, but yeah, we should. Yeah.
So you'd like to get a PCCP authorized for upcoming podcast episodes.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks a lot, everybody. Yeah. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week and have a happy holiday season. We will likely see you guys again in the new year. So Merry Christmas, everyone, and Happy New Year.
Bye now. Great.
Bye.
All right. See y'all.